All right, everyone. Thank you for joining me on this week's Tax Rep Network podcast. I'm Eric Green. I am joined today by Rob Ferrini. Rob is at McGowan Pro, and so first of all, Rob, thanks for coming on. All right,
Thanks for having me, Eric. I appreciate it.
this has been we've been doing a lot of webinars now about data security. First, the IRS wanted to do one, data breaches, the fallout from that, which led into we do a lot with Liscio, Smart Vault, Practice Protect and RightWorks in terms of data security and um, what solutions for accountants and attorneys. And inevitably, we get a lot of questions about, well, where do I go get a cyber policy? What do I want in my cyber policy?
Mhm.
Um, and so we're going to answer all those questions today. So
Yep, hope so.
yeah. So, Rob, for those of you who are not familiar with McGowan, since 1998, McGowan Pro is specialized in providing professional liability and related insurance products to accountants, investment advisors, attorneys, and other professionals. No other national broker can match their personal service. Rob Ferrini is McGowan Pro's cyber and professional liability insurance program manager. He's also served as an accountant's professional liability underwriter and has more than 30 years of insurance industry experience. Rob is a regular presenter on risk management, professional liability insurance. He's spoken nationally on professional liability and data breach coverage, best practices, and mitigating the risk of a claim against professional service firms. I think that's why Chris over at Liscio told me you were the guy to call. Um, so it's great to have you because this is, we're pounding people. You got to make sure you have your WISP, your information system plan in place, all your data security, what to do if there's a breach, and make sure you have cyber insurance. The obvious
Right.
question is, well, who do I call and what do I want?
Mhm.
And so, Rob, if you don't mind, how did you get into this? What led you into being the cybersecurity guy?
Good question. Thanks for asking. So I've been in the insurance business for about 35 years, and I've sold and serviced every kind of insurance policy you could imagine. And I don't know, 25 years ago, I started finding my niche in professional liability. And over time, maybe about 20 years ago, cyber insurance cyber was starting to become more prevalent. I think the first cyber breach was someone giving out floppy disks way back when, with data on it, and that data was malware, and it messed up their computers. So over the years, people would ask us about it, and then it just became a niche, and we've become um, very well versed in cyber insurance. It's gone through ups and downs, and cyber insurance, unlike other types of insurance, like I said, for 15 years, so the policy language is still in its infancy. If you think about a fire in your house or a car accident, it's been 100 years that cars have been around. It's been several hundred years that they've had fire insurance. They
Mhm.
can they can determine how much wood is going to burn, how much concrete is going to burn, how much it's going to cost to have something happen to your car, but they have a much more difficult time with cyber insurance and cyber risk because they don't actually know where the risk vectors are coming from. So it really becomes a very much of a niche where if you work with somebody who doesn't know the space, so many different policies have so much different language that it's tough to make sure that your clients have the right coverage for the right price.
Well, and it's interesting because our senior stakeholder liaison gave a presentation with a CPA who had actually had a data breach, who wanted to go
Mm.
out and help educate. Um, and it was interesting because I thought, okay, if there's a data breach, you have clients, they may have had a loss, their tax refunds, whatever, there's a delay. No, 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 no. I didn't even scratch the surface. The equipment, the reputation damage, the credit monitoring that they're now doing for former clients because they've left.
Mhm.
Um, it was, and now the FTC has come piling in, and they're gonna, because all the accountants, if you're not aware of it, to the FTC, you are a financial institution. Congratulations.
Right.
Um, and they're going to fine you if you don't do what you're supposed to do. And so, if you could, I think let's start with what are some of the cyber risks firms are facing, and I guess why do you need cyber insurance?
Okay, great question. Another great question. So, um, small firms, less than 100 employees, would be considered a small firm in most insurance markets. Small firms are a much higher risk because they might not have the uh, staff up with some of the IT issues that happen. So you're a high value target first off. There's a misconception that people think, oh, there's somebody in their basement just trying to hit my email and send me fake emails, but it's not like that. It is, uh, state actors. It is big business that they have computer programs and algorithms that just bombard you with stuff, whether it's a fake email, whether it's a denial of service attack, whether it's a ransomware attack. It's coming all the time. And if you don't have the right systems in place and you get attacked, even if you have the right systems in place, that you have to be right all the time. They only have to be right once.
Hmm.
So if you are breached, it's very expensive to overcome a breach. Now, statistics being what they are, it says that about 45% of businesses who have a data breach are no longer in business 6 months later because they either merged up because they couldn't afford it or they went out of business totally because they couldn't overcome or they lost too many clients. We've had that happen both instances with claims that they'll call us after the fact and say, oh, I should have got the coverage. I didn't get the coverage. I can't afford the coverage. I can't afford the costs involved.
And given the age of so many accountants and EAs, most EAs, I didn't I think I knew, but I didn't realize how many. It's a second career.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so I've spoken now to several accountants. This happened, they're in their 60s. So it's not that they couldn't come back from it. Their timeline, they're not going to. And you're right.
Mm-hmm.
It's easier almost to just hang it up.
Mm-hmm.
We're done. Um, and
So I'll give you a quick uh, current case. It's over now, but it's been within the last year. He got a fraudulent email, and it went to one of his senior people as an age, not in management, but a senior person in the firm. They clicked on something. It evaded. It got into the system. It turned on ransomware, locked down their system. They um, tried to recover. They had insurance. They called the insurance. The insurance tried to recover. Took them 2 days to get back up with the insurance, with the IT folks. But the big problem is they lost one of their drives and they haven't been able to get it back. And it's their audit files. And they haven't been able to get it back. And they're going on 3 months of rebuilding now. So they've been trying to rebuild the audit files for 3 months. So it's not that you get attacked and you fix it. It's they did everything that they were supposed to do. Everything was in place, but one of their drives, what they call their V drive, was corrupted beyond repair. And
and there
so now
was
they have
not there was not a copy of that off-site somewhere.
no, for whatever reason, they have to restore it manually. And it's taking them a long time to gather the data and get it redone.
Hmm.
And so that's just one of many claims I could tell you of things that are happening. That claim, with everything all in, they're about $400,000 into a data breach right now. Now they're a $10 million accounting firm, so they're on the the larger size. They're a good size accounting firm, but still, they've been down for months. They were down totally for 2 or 3 days because of the ransom attack. And now 3 or 4 months later, they're still trying to get some of the data back.
Yeah. According to Deloitte, I think it's north of 90% of all cyber attacks start through email.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Um, so what is cyber liability insurance? And in particular, and we'll get there, but I was going to say, what is the cyber liability insurance and what does it cover and what does it not?
Okay. Good question. So a cyber liability policy is basically two areas of coverage, two large areas of coverage. One is the firm's response to a breach, and the other is the monetary damages that a client would have. So the first party, which would be the insured, the accounting firm, the law practice, the tax preparer, and then the third party, which is the client. Now, when it comes to what's covered under the policy, when you have a standalone cyber policy, you would contact your insurance company and they would activate the policy and provide you with a breach coach. That breach coach is going to cover things like uh, IT, forensic IT, so they can go in and find out what the problem is, restoration, uh, network controls to make sure that they stop what's happening, um, notifications of not only clients if necessary, but also regulatory boards. One of the things that most people don't understand is it's not just where you're located, it's actually where your clients are located. So if you have clients in 10 states, you have to notify all 10 of those states. You have to follow what the states say. Now in New York and Maine, they have a 7-day reporting period. So if you find out on a Monday, you have until the following Monday to tell them you had the breach. Others say 30 days or 90 days, but you have to report right away. In Massachusetts, it has different laws. Each of the 50 states have different laws, different requirements. Also, it covers notification expenses, which whether that's a call center or offering credit monitoring or sending out the letters. It also covers ransomware, not only paying the ransom if they need to, but also determining whether or not ransom, uh, if your data is exfiltrated, which is taken away or just locked down. Most of the time they'll negotiate to try to figure out if to slow the people down so they can find out if your backups are going to work. So that's first party, all the expenses related to your response. Third party is the monetary damages. We see very few monetary damages anymore because it's hard to determine who caused the breach. A credit card company, a bank, the grocery store, the gas station, the nail salon. Who lost your data? Was it my accountant? Was it my lawyer? Or was it my grocery store? So we see very little third-party claims, but we see a lot of first-party claims.
And meaning that, I mean, for an accounting firm like that, where you had the ransomware, clearly it happened to them, their clients, if they're affected from them. But yeah, otherwise, if you're just like when I get these letters that are my information has been found on the dark web.
Right. That's a client. That's the first party. That's the insured's responsibility. It cost about $100 per person who raises their hand to say, I want credit monitoring. You have to send it out to everybody who could have been affected. About 20% of the people take it, and that's at $100 a head.
Yep.
So it can get expensive very quickly. Um, but the third party claim, the monetary damages, is someone used my credit card to get something fraudulently. Someone took out a mortgage in my name. Those kind of things we don't see very much at all anymore. Most of it is all what the insured or the firm has to do if there's a breach by statute.
You know, I've heard this from a few people. My malpractice policy has a cyber something. It's mentioned in there.
Mhm.
Isn't that enough? I mean, so Rob, why would somebody want And I can tell, but everyone listening, Green and Squires has a separate cyber policy. Tax Rep Network, we take credit cards. We have a separate cyber policy. TG Publishing, where we have our books and we sell classes, has a separate cyber policy. Why a separate policy versus that little language that they have in their current malpractice policy?
So most of the time, and I don't know of any that it isn't this way, back to that first and third party coverage. The first party for your client, for your firm's response, and third party for your client's damages. It's basically a throw in. They throw in policy limits. So let's say you have a $1 million policy. They
Mhm.
throw in $1 million of coverage to cover client damages. There aren't any client damages, so they never have to respond to it.
Right.
They give you a sublimit, a very small sublimit of maybe 25,000 or 50,000 for your response. So number one, the coverage you really need isn't in the policy. It says right in there, it has cyber policy, it has network security coverage, and it has notification expense.
Right.
Great, but it's very much limited. The other thing is the language in a professional liability policy is a professional services trigger, which means you have to be doing something to your client to make sure to have that coverage affected. So if you
Interesting.
have a ransomware attack where they don't take the data, or if you have a denial of service attack, that does not affect the client. There is no services trigger. They're going to say,
So,
sorry,
yeah, it's not covered.
it's not damaging a client. We don't cover it.
Right.
So it's a
Interesting.
misnomer to think that the cyber policy, the cyber endorsement in a professional liability policy is going to amount to much.
So,
Now,
well, I was just saying on that line, if you could go into, so let's talk about what a cyber policy actually covers.
so cyber policy is going to cover virtually anything that happens with a cyber breach. So back to the breach coach. They have an intake um, meeting with you. Now it is a first or second year associate just to get some information.
Mhm.
They then turn it over to a claims and handling person, usually a senior lawyer, that then runs the point and gets all of their vetted service providers in place. Do you need a forensic IT guy? Do you need notification? Do you have to tell the state? Do you have to tell the clients? Do you have to restore data? All of the things that could happen are covered. Ransomware, they're going to try to negotiate, slow the process down so they can find out if your backups are going to work. If you have good backups and they don't need to pay a ransom, if they can slow the people down instead of saying you got to pay me in 24 hours, they can slow them down and say, whatever negotiation they do, then maybe you don't have to pay and maybe you don't need to get the key back. If your data is not secure and they do have it, they're going to try to get the key to make sure that what they're going to give you is going to work. They do everything that you need. The only thing that's really not covered under a cyber policy is theft of funds. When you think of a cyber policy,
Mhm.
it's theft or loss of data. So
Right.
security numbers, biometrics, health information, addresses, birth dates, that kind of stuff. It is not the theft of funds. So if they break into your system and go into your bank account and take money from you, that's not covered under a cyber policy. If they get the access to the client's accounts and they steal their account number and they steal their social security number, that is covered under the policy. So money, uh, crime coverage or theft of funds or securities is not covered under the policy, but everything else basically is.
So if I'm a firm and before we went live, we were talking about how you guys do everything from the big firms all the way down to solos. How would a CPA or EA, well, I suppose we rely on you. How do we determine how much coverage we need?
There's a couple of factors that go into that. One is how many records do you have? Records would be a social security number first. So how many social security numbers do you have? If you have a lot of social security numbers, you need more coverage. If you have a lot of staff people, the more staff people you have, the more likelihood of them making a mistake, the more coverage you need. Depending on the size, $1 million is usually where people fall. Now, we do have people who have less than that, 500,000 or 250,000 of coverage, but $1 million is the standard. And then depending on the size, you might have $5 million. The more coverage you need, the larger you are, the more difficult it is to get. Because of the pandemic, they really cut back on the higher limits unless there's a pressing need. Now, if you have a contract that requires it, it's relatively easy to get that kind of limits. So if you're working with a bank and the bank says you got to have 5 million, you can get it.
Yeah. I mean, so you may have a requirement for a third party.
Right.
How difficult is it to qualify for coverage? I remember doing a fairly wasn't huge, but it was a decent sized questionnaire. The other thing, by the way, which surprised me, we had a third party that would do some updates for us on the
Mhm.
website.
Mhm.
They apparently were using a remote desktop.
Mhm.
We got an email from our insurance company that they noted this and it would disqualify us.
Right.
And we ended up, I called my web guy who went and looked, and he's like, why is this here? The third party, I mean, you could tell it was the third party. They responded, well, that's how we can log in, and yeah, you can't keep a remote desktop open.
Right.
It's a backdoor in.
Yep.
Um, but the surprising thing was that the insurance company went and actually reviewed the site, and this was months
Mhm.
after we put the policy in place.
Mhm.
Um, so I guess I start off with this, and I'll give you multiple questions. But the first question was, how difficult is it to qualify?
So qualification is really based on that risk assessment they did for you. So what is gonna happen is they're gonna ask you three basic questions. Number one, do you have MFA, multi-factor authentication? If you're a small guy, a solo, you can go to a company called Duo, DOU, and for less than 10 users, it's free, zero. Multi-factor authentication is something you know and something you have. So you put it on your system, it sends to your phone, you enter the code, it gives you access. This is going to date me, but back in the 80s, they used to have this thing called the club. I don't know if you remember the club. They put it on
In the
the
car.
steering wheel, and it was very easy to bypass that. It's very easy to just cut the steering wheel and drive off with the car. But the bad guys are looking for the path of least resistance,
Right,
the low-hanging fruit. So they walk by and they say, "Oh, that one's got a club. I'm not going to take that one. That has a club. I'm not going to take one. This one doesn't have a club. I'm going to take that one."
right,
So they go out and they ping your system and see if you have multi-factor authentication. The bad guys. If you have multi-factor authentication, they move along. If you don't, they're going to start hitting you harder to see how they can crack your passwords using blunt force. So the first thing you need is multi-factor authentication. You need it on email. You need it on privileged accounts, excuse me, which is admin accounts. And then you'll reach the first level of insurance companies that will look at you. Then you need a VPN. A VPN is like a hose as opposed to just a shotgun, just sending stuff out into the internet. A hose is a connection from one end to the other that they can't infiltrate. So VPNs are cheap. You can get them inexpensively if you're, again, a solo. You can buy a suite of services for like $50 a month that's going to give you all of this stuff.
right.
And then you need an encrypted backup. If you have an encrypted backup that's not mirrored on your system, that you have a breach, they can go to that backup that's encrypted and restore your data, reduces the cost. So those three things are going to help you get coverage. The other thing is, just like with you, they're going to send messages to your website and your email address to make sure that you don't have any thing open, like remote desktop protocol. If you have that port open, they're going to say, we're not going to insure you unless you close that port. And we get all kinds of excuses why they can't shut it down. But during the pandemic, that's where all the ransomware came from. Remote desktop protocol just flooded people because they weren't work from home, for security. So those four things are critical to get coverage. Other than that, as long as you have that security, as long as you depend on where you are with revenue, number of employees, and number of records, we'll get you the
It,
coverage.
yeah. If somebody is listening to this, if they contact you, is this something you'll work with them?
Yes.
Saying, look, we'll look at your system, but you need to do this, do this. I don't know if
Mhm.
you have particular vendors you work with, but the point is, again, there are a lot of accountants that I don't even know where to begin. Like in
Right.
other words, it's almost so overwhelming. I'd almost rather not deal with it.
Hmm.
And the danger is it'll what the accountant that did that talk with the senior stakeholder liaison person was in the middle of negotiating for the sale of their practice. They were 62 years old. They just sold their practice now. They turned 71. It was a 9-year recovery period to get through that and rebuild their practice to sell. And he said out of pocket, he spent about 100,000, but he can estimate his cost closer to 500,000.
Yep. No, that makes sense. But yes, we are very much hands-on agency broker. We work with thousands of accounting firms, like you said, and we help them determine what they need and how to get it. We can refer them to IT people. First thing we would do if someone wanted coverage is we'd help them fill out the application, or would send them an application, have them fill it out, and answer any questions they have. Then we'd do a risk assessment to find out who's going to take them. So if you don't have multi-factor authentication, there are some people that will still provide you with insurance, but it's going to be 2 or 3x what it would be if you had multi-factor authentication. So you're going to pay a lot more because you don't have the basic controls in place.
And what's worth noting for those folks listening to this who were not on those webinars, the FTC and those fines, it's limited. It's like 57,000. I mean, it's not immaterial.
Right.
It's really for people that don't do what they're supposed to do. In fact, I think it was actually Chris from Licio. We were having this conversation on one of the webinars, and what he said is, if you and Steve Perkins actually was the other panelist. If you do everything, you have a WISP, you have multi-factor authentication, you have all of this stuff. It's not that you can't get hacked. I
Right.
mean, the federal government has been hacked. It's the fact that you have done everything you're supposed to do. If you notify who you're supposed to and all of that, you will not get an FTC fine. The IRS will not come after to pull your e-filing privileges. Listen, it happens. You've done everything you can. It sucks. No one wants to go through it. And the cyber policy obviously is going to help cushion at least the worst of the blow.
Going to
And
speed you.
also,
It's going to speed you through the circumstances. It's going to help you because they're going to provide the vetted service providers. They're going to do all the work. You're going to give them access to your system, and they're going to get it done quicker than you could do it yourself.
yeah, one of the things I find interesting is when I have clients come to me, it's calming to know that there's somebody who knows what they're doing and they're involved. It doesn't solve the problem, but somebody's in charge because again, this happens on top of all your normal stuff. You have clients who need things, government, filing deadlines. No, it's a mess, and to have the folks show up. In fact, let's talk about that. What happens? You gave us a little bit, but what happens when somebody does file a claim? Like you said, that triggers the policy. I mean, and somebody the intake person will get some basic information. Where does it go from there?
So usually, the goal is for them to respond within 2 hours. Now, when and if you have a claim, it's not really if, but when you have the claim, that you don't have your IT person jump in and start fixing it. First thing you want to do is contact your local lawyer that you work with. Second thing you want for client privilege. Uh, and then the next thing you want to do is you want to contact your insurance company. And then third, you want to contact your um, internet security provider.
That's interesting because the first thing I would have done is called my internet security to figure out what happened and then call the insurance company. But that you're right, that's good advice because they come in and start trying to clean things up. They're actually potentially doing more damage.
Right. They're taking away the trend. They're restoring stuff and now they don't have the trail and they can't see what happened and where it happened and who was affected by the breach, if and when there was a breach, if they fixed it. So once you call your insurance agent or you call the carrier directly, we would prefer that you call us unless it's after hours and you can't get in touch with me. But all of our agents, all of our brokers, their cell phone number is on the signature in their email. So everybody has our cell phone numbers. Once you call, the service goal is within 2 hours, but we've had it as quickly as 20 minutes, and that's on a weekend. And they will activate the policy. They will start all the levers going at the same time. So whatever, they'll get a quick analysis. They'll send you some documents so that they can access your system. They'll go into your system. They'll start looking at what's going on. They'll get all the information that they need so they can start working immediately to stop whatever's happening, especially if it's a ransomware attack, and then move on to restoring and notifying.
All right. And so Rob, we're actually a little short on time. I have to tell you, I just learned something very critical about don't go running to the IT guy, contact the carrier first. Um, the final thought. So first of all, anyone listening to this who realizes, I got to do this, how do they get a hold of you?
So they can call me directly, 508-656-1327. They can click on that QR code right there.
For
And
those of
that'll,
you, for people listening to this, you don't see on the video, there is a QR code on the video.
if you have the video, or you can go to McGowanprofessional.com, all written out. So MCGOWAN professional.com. And then you can click through to see me, or you can, best thing to do is to call me.
Yep. All right. No. Unfortunately, this is the world we live in. It's critical. It is critical. And by the way, it was not terribly expensive.
No,
Yeah.
depends
I
on
mean,
you.
listen, wasn't a few pennies, but in terms of my malpractice insurance, it wasn't that bad.
Yeah, so just so that you know, $1 million of coverage with a $2,500 deductible, it's doing $1 million in revenue is $1,250.
Yeah.
So if you're doing 100,000, you're going to be about $300.
Right. It's let's put it this way. It sucks paying for it, but like I always tell my wife, I have disability insurance. I hope I never get it back.
That's right.
I hope that is an expense that goes right down the drain.
Yeah,
All right.
helps you to sleep better at night
Yep.
because
Absolutely.
because it is
Um,
a disaster if you have a breach and you have to figure it out yourself and continue doing everything else you do in a given day.
yeah. No, Rob, honestly, I think I'm going to talk to Chris. I think we got to get you on and we have to do a follow-up webinar on this because it's great information, critical. Um, and so listen, thank you for taking the time. Everybody listening, thank you for tuning in. I will put Rob's information in the description. So if you're not watching the video and you can't scan the QR code, but if you and your practice don't have this, it's a must have in today's world because the fallout will, I hate to sound overly dramatic, it will destroy your practice.
Mhm.
and certainly can.
Yes, certainly
Um,
can.
so, Rob, again, thank you for taking the time. Everyone, thank you for listening in, and see you next week on the Tax Rep Network podcast.
Thank you. I appreciate it.